Imagine waking up tomorrow morning and hearing the news. Yellowstone supervolcano will erupt in 24 hours. Panic spreads across America. Roads clog with traffic. Grocery shelves empty. The government scrambles to respond. But what exactly would happen in those final 24 hours? And if Yellowstone really exploded, how would it change the US and the entire planet? Let's step into this chilling scenario. The first hours of panic. It begins like any other morning in America. Families eat breakfast, kids rush off to school, and people head to work. But suddenly, news alerts start buzzing on every phone, every TV, and every radio station. A trembling voice from the National Emergency Alert System announces, Yellowstone supervolcano shows signs of imminent eruption. Estimated time, 24 hours. Within minutes, disbelief turns to fear. Social media explodes with hashtags like Yellowstone 24 hours and hashtag Doomsday Alert. Cable news networks run endless footage of helicopters circling over Yellowstone National Park, showing geysers spitting higher than ever before, and animals fleeing in unusual patterns. Scientists appear on screen, pale and tense, warning that this is not a drill. In Wyoming, Montana, and Idaho, the states closest to Yellowstone, chaos erupts. Highways jam instantly as families pack their cars with whatever they can grab. Gas stations run dry, grocery stores are stripped bare, and banks are flooded with people trying to withdraw cash. Sirens wail in every town, guiding people toward designated evacuation zones, though no one knows if any safe place truly exists. The U.S. government activates the National Guard. Military convoys roll into small towns, trying to maintain order, but panic is spreading faster than the evacuation. Parents scream for their children, elderly residents refuse to leave their homes, and hospitals are overwhelmed by people suffering from heart attacks, asthma attacks, and sheer panic. Farther away, in cities like New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles, the atmosphere is different, but just as tense. People know they won't be buried under lava or ash immediately, but the thought of a volcanic winter terrifies them. Shelves in Walmart and Costco are stripped of bottled water, canned food, and flashlights. Pharmacies run out of masks as citizens prepare for the ash that scientists say could blanket the nation. Flights sell out instantly. Airports overwhelmed with Americans desperate to leave the country. But soon, even international airlines suspend travel to and from the U.S. The world watches in horror as America faces what could be its darkest 24 hours in history. Back in Yellowstone, the land itself groans. The ground shakes with small earthquakes, roads crack open, and boiling geysers blast violently into the sky. Scientists inside monitoring stations send out live warnings. The pressure is building at an unstoppable rate. Some scientists break down in tears during press conferences, knowing what's about to happen. By the end of the first few hours, a chilling realization settles over the nation. There is no real escape. People can run, people can hide, but if Yellowstone truly erupts, life in the U.S., and possibly the world, will never be the same. The countdown to eruption. As the first waves of panic sweep the nation, scientists gather in emergency press conferences, trying to explain what's happening beneath Yellowstone. They describe a massive chamber of molten rock, stretching for miles under the Earth's crust, now rising with unstoppable pressure. The ground is swelling, they say, and tremors ripple through the region like the heartbeat of a monster preparing to wake. The U.S. government declares a national state of emergency. FEMA headquarters operates around the clock, issuing evacuation orders for millions in Wyoming, Montana, and Idaho. Entire towns are told to leave immediately. Highways choke with traffic, Cars crawl forward as people abandon vehicles and continue on foot. Helicopters circle overhead, dropping emergency supply kits and guiding people toward shelters. But no shelter feels safe. Seismographs show increasingly violent spikes, tiny earthquakes popping like warning shots every few minutes. Residents in nearby towns hear distant rumbles like thunder, though the sky above them is clear. Geysers that once sprayed boiling water harmlessly for tourists now roar with terrifying force, blasting skyward as if the earth itself is screaming. Television anchors report with shaking voices. "We have approximately 18 hours left," one journalist announces, as footage shows military trucks escorting buses filled with evacuees. In Salt Lake City, Denver, and even Dallas, residents hundreds of miles away begin taping up windows and storing water, preparing for ash clouds that scientists warn could stretch across most of the United States within days. Religious groups gather in churches, temples, and mosques, praying for a miracle. Some people post tearful goodbyes on social media, their videos going viral worldwide. Others lash out, looting stores or rioting in the streets. Humanity's best and worst instincts clash in these precious hours before disaster. In Washington, D.C., the president addresses the nation. The Oval Office looks somber, flanked by military officials and FEMA directors. The president admits that if Yellowstone erupts, the U.S. will face a catastrophe beyond imagination. But he urges calm, promising that emergency shelters, food reserves, and international aid will be mobilized. Yet even his words can't mask the fear in his eyes. Meanwhile, scientists at Yellowstone's monitoring station send live updates. Ground temperatures soar, and toxic gases seep into the air. Birds flee in massive flocks, animals stampede through forests, and bison, symbols of Yellowstone, are seen collapsing from poisonous fumes. Each new report makes one thing clear: the eruption is no longer a possibility, it's inevitable. By the time the clock ticks down to the final 12 hours, the region shakes violently. Roads split apart, power lines collapse, and massive cracks tear open in the earth. The sound of the land groaning echoes like distant cannon fire. The countdown is no longer measured in hours, but in tremors, each quake louder than the last. All of America holds its breath. Families cling together. Cities prepare for skies to go dark. And scientists warn that when Yellowstone finally explodes, the first blast could be 1,000 times more powerful than the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. The world is waiting, and the clock is still ticking. The moment of eruption. The countdown reaches its final hour. The ground across Yellowstone shakes like a living beast, trying to break free. Residents hundreds of miles away feel the tremors rumbling beneath their feet. Seismographs spike off the charts, and then, suddenly, all sensors go quiet. An eerie silence before the storm. Scientists exchange fearful glances. They know what's coming. At exactly 24 hours after the first warning, the earth splits open. A deafening roar, like 1,000 jet engines, rips through the air. The ground convulses, mountains shudder, and then it happens. Yellowstone erupts. A colossal explosion tears into the sky, visible from space. A glowing column of ash, rock, and fire shoots upward at supersonic speed, piercing the stratosphere. Within minutes, the plume towers over 20 miles high, dwarfing thunderstorms and making the atmosphere itself tremble. The first victims are those closest to Yellowstone. Entire towns in Wyoming and Montana vanish under waves of molten rock and pyroclastic surges moving faster than a hurricane. Forests ignite instantly, animals are vaporized, and rivers boil into steam. Roads melt, Cars are swallowed, and every living thing within hundreds of miles is gone in moments. Shock waves blast outward with unimaginable force. Windows shatter in cities as far as Salt Lake City and Denver. People fall to the ground as the air itself seems to explode around them. Planes in the sky are forced into emergency landings, their engines choking on ash. The ash cloud begins its deadly spread. Within the first hour, a thick blanket of darkness swallows the western United States. Daylight turns to midnight as fine gray dust rains from the sky, coating streets, cars, and rooftops. Breathing without a mask becomes nearly impossible. Lungs clog with razor-sharp volcanic glass particles carried in the ash. News cameras capture apocalyptic images. Schools buried under ash, highways disappearing into gray deserts, and terrified families stumbling through blackened streets with cloths tied over their faces. Reporters break down live on air, choking on the same dust they're trying to describe. The U.S. government loses contact with several states as power grids fail. Cell towers collapse under the weight of ash, and emergency radios crackle with static. Cities outside the immediate blast zone, like Chicago, Dallas, and Los Angeles, begin to feel the effects as the massive ash cloud spreads eastward, carried by powerful jet streams. But the eruption isn't over. For hours, Yellowstone continues to spew molten fury, each blast sending more ash and rock into the sky. Rivers of lava carve across the land, swallowing forests and highways alike. Lightning storms crackle above the ash plume, igniting new fires across the countryside. By the end of the first day, Yellowstone has transformed the American West into a hellscape. Scientists estimate that the energy released is thousands of times greater than all nuclear weapons ever detonated in human history. The unimaginable has become reality. Yellowstone has erupted, and America is only beginning to face the nightmare. The U.S. in darkness. Within hours of the Yellowstone eruption, the United States changes forever. The once bright skies over the West are now pitch black. Streetlights flicker uselessly against a wall of ash. Noon looks like midnight, and the sun disappears behind a curtain of choking gray dust. Airports across the country shut down as ash clogs jet engines, grounding thousands of planes. Highways are buried beneath inches, then feet, of volcanic ash. Cars stall and fail, their engines suffocating on the razor-sharp particles. Emergency vehicles struggle to move, and ambulances carrying the injured crawl through streets coated in gray powder, their sirens muffled by the heavy air. The ash falls relentlessly. In Montana, Wyoming, and Idaho, entire towns are entombed. Roofs collapse under the weight. Schools, hospitals, and churches vanish beneath the thick gray blanket. Survivors stumble outside with bandanas over their faces, coughing violently as the ash cuts into their lungs like shards of glass. Hospitals across the West overflow with people struggling to breathe. Mask supplies vanish overnight. Cities farther east, like Chicago and Dallas, are not spared. By the second day, winds carry the ash cloud across most of the United States. In New York, commuters step outside to find the morning light dimmed, as if twilight has come early. Washington, D.C. declares martial law as fear grips the capital. Grocery stores are empty, shelves stripped of bread, water, and batteries. Power grids begin to fail as ash shorts out electrical lines and solar panels are buried. Crops wither almost instantly. Fields of corn, wheat, and soybeans in the Midwest are blanketed with suffocating ash, leaving nothing but gray wastelands where America's breadbasket once thrived. Farmers weep as generations of work vanish under a lifeless crust. Water supplies are poisoned as rivers and reservoirs fill with ash, turning fresh water into toxic sludge. The U.S. government opens massive emergency shelters in stadiums, schools, and underground bunkers. But the demand is overwhelming. Families are split apart, and people fight for space, food, and clean air. National Guard soldiers patrol the streets, but even they struggle with failing equipment and the same suffocating ash that blankets civilians. News channels go offline one by one as satellites and communication towers are disabled. Social media collapses, leaving millions in silence, disconnected from loved ones. Panic deepens as rumors spread unchecked. Some say the eruption was just the beginning, that more volcanic systems across the world are ready to blow. Relief efforts from neighboring countries begin, but planes can't enter U.S. airspace safely. Ships carrying aid are delayed, trapped at ports by storms of ash and lightning. America, usually the world's helper in times of disaster, now finds itself isolated, crippled, and begging for aid. For the first time in modern history, the United States is plunged into complete darkness, not just from the ash in the sky, but from the collapse of its infrastructure, its food systems, and its sense of stability. People huddle around candles and fires, wondering if the sun will ever rise again. And scientists warn this is only the beginning. The ash cloud hasn't just swallowed the U.S., it's spreading across the globe. The global consequences. As America struggles in darkness, the rest of the world begins to feel Yellowstone's wrath. Within weeks, the ash cloud encircles the globe. Satellite images reveal a planet draped in a gray shroud. Sunlight dims everywhere. Temperatures plunge. It feels as though Earth has been thrust into a nuclear winter. In Europe, skies turn orange-gray, and crops begin to fail. Wheat fields in France wither, vineyards in Italy collapse under relentless cold, and farmers across Germany and Poland watch helplessly as their harvests rot. In Asia, monsoons falter, and rice paddies dry up. In Africa, drought intensifies as sunlight is blocked, and millions face food shortages. Air travel becomes nearly impossible worldwide. Ash damages engines, forcing nations to ground fleets of aircraft. Shipping routes slow as volcanic debris, and storms make oceans dangerous. Global trade halts almost overnight, sending economies into freefall. Stock markets collapse, and currencies lose value. Panic spreads not just in the U.S., but across every nation. Famine follows quickly. With America's breadbasket destroyed, global grain reserves run out in months. Nations begin hoarding what little food they have left. Prices skyrocket. Families in developing countries struggle to afford even a loaf of bread. Starvation spreads, and millions face malnutrition. Aid organizations are overwhelmed, unable to reach many of the hardest-hit regions. The environment itself shifts. Temperatures worldwide drop by 10 to 15 degrees Fahrenheit. Summers feel like winters. Snow falls in places that have never seen it before. Rivers freeze, farmlands become barren, and forests die. Livestock perish in the cold. Species across the food chain vanish, unable to adapt to the sudden volcanic winter. Governments scramble to maintain order. Martial law is declared in dozens of countries. Border controls tighten as climate refugees flee their homes. In South America, people migrate north in search of food. In Asia, millions cross into neighboring countries. Tensions rise, and conflict brews over resources. Water, farmland, and food supplies become the new weapons of war. Yet, amid the chaos, moments of resilience shine. Scientists work tirelessly to design artificial light and heat systems to grow food indoors. Nations form emergency alliances to share resources. Underground greenhouses sprout in old subway tunnels. Communities come together, building networks of support, trading, and surviving against all odds. Still, humanity knows it is living through one of the darkest chapters in history. Historians will call it the volcanic winter of Yellowstone, and survivors, decades later, will tell their grandchildren about the time the sun disappeared, crops failed,